Good afternoon and welcome back to California Carnivores. I, of course, am Damon, and today we're going to do something we've gotten a lot of excitement and requests for in our seed sowing guide, and that is how to grow Nepenthes from seed. Now, one of the reasons we get a lot of requests from this is because Nepenthes are just so cool. The other reason we get a lot of requests from this is because it's very hard to grow Nepenthes from seeds. If these are your first seeds that you've ever grown, start with some fava beans or something. Work your way up. Even some Drosera capensis seeds would be a lot easier than this. But it can be done. We do it here, and we're going to show you exactly how we do it here. And we're still figuring things out all the time. Like I'm always saying, we're still dialing things in. So I'm just going to basically, show our successes, but we'll also talk about some of the problems that you might encounter. Now, one of the first problems you might encounter is, do you actually have Nepenthes seeds? If you bought them online, you might not. Well, there's a lot of, not good sellers of seeds on eBay and places like that. So I would avoid buying Nepenthes seeds from random vendors in general. We've been selling our seeds, and those are nice and fresh and reliable. Also avoid buying any species seeds that are coming directly out of Indonesia. You're doing more harm than good with that. If you're buying seeds, you're probably buying it from some local who's stealing those seeds out of the wild and selling them. And while they may be supporting their families that way, someone like that can really make an impact on the seed production of a small population of Nepenthes if they're just collecting and collecting and collecting. So we don't ever buy species seeds out of Indonesia, and I don't recommend you doing that either. So let's say you've bought some Nepenthes seeds and you have them to sow. We can talk about that. Or maybe you've made some Nepenthes seeds from your Nepenthes plant and you have some seeds to grow. Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Unless you pollinated that flower, you probably have what we call dummy seeds. I have a couple of things here to show you, of course. So these little guys look so much like seeds. They came out of what looked like seed pods. And they look like little tiny guys that would turn into plants. But these are not seeds. These are what Peter calls dummy seeds. Don't feel like a dummy though, because they do look just like seeds. But if I open up some real seeds here to compare, so these are actual Nepenthes seeds. I'm going to scatter them so you can see them. They're a little bit longer and more pronounced, but then the real main deal is that swollen little guy in the middle. That's the embryo. That's what's going to turn into a plant. Without an embryo, it's not a seed. And a lot of times when you collect seeds, there'll be a mix in there. Don't try to get them out. You'll never get the dummy seeds out of here, and it's not really important. So first off, make sure you have real Nepenthes seeds. Another thing I talk about is freshness. This is controversial. This is going to get a lot of comments below this video, but it's actually a science fact. I'm sorry, but it's true. We have a lot of concern about freshness of seeds that we sell, and you'll see a lot of people blaming poor germination rates on old seed, and it is true that older seed will probably have, a slightly decreased germination rate. But I'm going to do a whole video on this soon, and I'll go get them, and we'll do that later. I don't want to open them up yet because they're sterile. But we're germinating seeds right here, right now, that were collected in 2018, and we're getting great germination on them. So don't worry about Nepenthes seeds from us that are 3 months old. That's not going to make any big difference. Maybe like one seed out of 25 would be less likely to germinate, but you can still get great germination on old seeds. Now you guys can go to war in the comments below. Once you have seeds, now we gotta have to grow them. Now the sprinkling is actually not that hard. It's keeping them alive long term, and that's where it really gets tricky. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, let's talk about what to sow them on. So there's a couple good options. This is chopped up New Zealand sphagnum moss with a little bit of pumice in there. You could use a little perlite if that's what you have, but we like to use a little pumice. And that's a nice mix. It's just it's probably about 3 parts chopped New Zealand sphagnum and 1 part pumice or perlite. That's a good mix. And both these mixes have their pros and cons. You definitely want to sterilize whatever mix you use, because if you did get your hands on real Nepenthes seeds, they're probably pretty precious to you and you want to grow them. So go through the trouble of sterilizing all the soil that you use. And then New Zealand sphagnum can be particularly guilty of harboring all kinds of weird little rushes and grass seeds in there. So if you sterilize it, it'll kill all that. The other thing you could use, and what we've been using more and more of, is Coco Peat. Now, we don't recommend this for growing carnivorous plants as like a usual mix, but for the Nepenthes seedlings, Coco Peat is actually really great. This is the brand I've been using. What is this brand? Oh, it's Canna, C-A-N-N-A. I don't have any huge brand loyalty. Honestly, most of this stuff is being used to grow cannabis, and so go and buy the expensive stuff at a hydroponic store if you have those yet in your area. We have lots of those here in California. But Coco Peat is actually ground up coconut husks. So there can be a lot of salt in this too, because it comes from coconuts, we're right on the ocean. So good high quality stuff like this has already been leached. They've already leached out a lot of the salt and minerals that might be still residing in here, but you need to do that more. So we're going to talk about that next, about how to leach out extra minerals. So I'm going to have Daniela follow me over to the sink here, get a little bit more of a view of our filthy workroom. All right, so here we go. There's Toby. You want to do this in the sink or outside because it's going to be kind of a mess. I use a pot to leach it all out. These net bottom pots are really perfect for this process. They're also good to grow Nepenthes in, so if you have some of these, this is perfect. But any kind of pot with just a few holes in the bottom will do. So then I set it on another pot, inverted, so it's like a little stand. And then I'm just going to take all my Coco Peat, break it up to make it nice and loose. It's kind of like coffee grounds. It's almost like making coffee. Gross coconut quarter coffee. And you want to leave a little space on top and keep it kind of loose so the water can move through it freely. And this is good reverse osmosis water. So it's like 5 parts per million dissolved solids. Very, very pure water. The purer it is, the faster the leaching will happen. Down there now. And then I'm just going to start watering it in. You don't want it to overflow over the top, so stop if it starts to get close to that. And it will take a second. Growing plants from seeds is not for the impatient. You definitely need patience. And we're just going to keep doing this. I'm probably going to run about 3 of these through there. If you have a TDS meter, you can measure the water as it comes out of there. Just gather it in a little cup, and you can see the total dissolved solids will march down. It doesn't march down as fast as you think. Like that water might be like 150, and then every time I do it, I'll probably drop it like 5 or 10. So it takes a little while. We're going to cut and come on back after this is all done. Okay. So we got about 3 gallons of very pure reverse osmosis water run through our Coco Peat. Toss it into my mixing bowl. I like to use these big old stainless steel bowls. After they get too gross for the kitchen, they're dented. They're great for the garden. This is just a little bit of pumice. We'll toss that in, and we're just going to mix it in with our hands really quick. The pumice just adds a little bit of air to this mix so it's not too heavy. And you want it damp but not super, super wet. A lot of finesse in growing Nepenthes from seed, and so that's what makes it tricky. Anyways, that's pretty good. And then we're just going to fill up our 5-inch pot really quickly. And again, just in my previous videos, just like that, I'm going to leave a little bit of space on top so that the seeds don't roll over right over the edge. Get it full in all the corners, just like that. Kind of rub your fingers across it to take any big chunks of hummus off. And there we go. It's always good to keep a bowl of water here as you're working. You can dip your hands in the water and wash your hands. I don't have that yet, so I'm gonna go wash my hands really quick and then we'll sprinkle some seeds. Okay, we're back in clean hand mode. If you've sterilized your soil, you want to sprinkle your seeds quickly. The longer this is out here in the air, especially, you know, if you could go in the house and do this, that would be a good idea as opposed to doing it in a greenhouse like this. Because in a greenhouse like this, there's a lot of fungal spores, moss spores, and all of that's in the air and it's all gathering on here. And we'll talk about this in a second, but you really want to keep other competing things from growing in there. So if you took it out, if you had it sterilized and in a bag, you want to take it out quickly. And then let's get these seeds sown. I've already got my tag written ahead of time. The actual phrase. Nepenthes seeds are wind distributed, so they are very light. If I sneeze, they're all gonna blast into the air. I usually even hold my breath. And you can probably see the way they float down, how light they are. And it's really easy to lose them over the side of the pot if you're not careful. So kind of stick to the center. We're looking for nice even coverage. Just as always, you don't want a whole big wad in the middle because then they'll all compete with each other. The more space they have from each other, the less competition, the faster they will grow. So don't crowd the pot too much. But that looks pretty great to me right there. These are actually Nepenthes muridensis by Edwardsiana seeds. So I'm really excited about those. Look up both those parents. I think they'd be really cool. So now we have our seeds sown. We're gonna mist them. A little hydrogen peroxide in this water. Keep them clean. Kill any moss spores or any other spores that might have landed in this time. And we just wanna get them nice and wet. Again, don't do it down here. That's gonna push them all around. Do it up here. Okay, we're gonna throw our tag in there really quickly. And then I'm gonna put it inside this bag. This could be in a tray with a dome on top, this could be a bell jar, anything to keep the humidity high. If you use a Ziploc bag like this, always inflate it. That'll keep the bag from collapsing back down on the seeds. Especially with these Nepenthes seeds, if they touch this plastic, they're gonna stick right on there and you'll never get them back into the soil. So definitely inflate it like that. And then a good place to put this would be under grow lights. 12 to 14 hour photo period, 6 to 8 inches away from the top. You can do Nepenthes seeds any time of year as long as you're doing them under grow lights, which you probably should. And I wouldn't really set much water in here. You want to have it nice and damp, but not sopping wet like some of our other seeds, because really wet is going to encourage moss and algae to grow faster. We want it damp enough to make the seeds sprout, but not so wet that things take over. And it can take a long time for them to sprout. I mean, with some bottom warming under grow lights, they could sprout as soon as a week or two, but it might take a couple of months. Sometimes it can take like 6 months, 8 months. Never give up on seeds. Let them, at least give a full year before you throw anything out, because I've always had surprises. Over the years, I've had all kinds of surprises of things I didn't think were gonna work, did work. So here are some seeds that I've sown already. I don't know if we're gonna be able to get inside there and look. Maybe I'll take the lid off just really quick. Okay, Danielle says we don't need to. But you can see they're already starting to germinate in there. These are Nepenthes vogeli by Truncata Passion. I'm also excited about these. What am I not excited about around here? So those are just now starting to germinate. I have some other ones. These ones I have all sealed up in a tub like this. It was sterile, and by keeping them sealed, I'm keeping fungus gnats out and other spores from getting in there. So it's really a good idea. Stuff will get in there, but you know, the less gets in there, the better. And as soon as they start to germinate like this, if you've chosen the Coco Peat, you need to start fertilizing right away. I feel like with the New Zealand sphagnum mix, you probably don't need to fertilize as much, but there is something about the Coco Peat that will make you need to fertilize pretty often. You can see I have these other guys. These are Ventricosa by Wardsiana. Some of you may have even bought these seeds from us because we sold a few. You can see they're all germinating here. And these were sown in August. They'll start to get kind of pale. You can probably see some little pale guys in there if you don't fertilize them. So if your Nepenthes seedlings start to get paler and paler and paler, you need to feed them. Now, that should be a no-brainer, except for the more you fertilize, the faster the moss will grow and the faster the algae and even fungal rot will grow with fertilizer. That's the tricky part. So it's pretty easy to sow them. It's pretty easy to even get them to sprout, but it can take years to get them up to big enough plants where moss and stuff won't overtake them. You know, it can be a little faster than that if everything's perfect. And you can see in this flat, for some reason, the moss really took over in these two sections, but not in here. Maybe I kept it a little bit drier, maybe there's a little bit thicker on the fertilizer, and you can see the moss is becoming a problem in this section. If I pull it apart, you can see little Nepenthes seedlings down in there, but they're getting buried in this moss. You can gently pull some away if you have a lot of spare time and you're very careful. You can gently pull some of this moss away with your fingers like this. But see, even I just pulled up a little baby Nepenthes. And it's very, very delicate and tricky. And I can probably stick him back in there, maybe he'll grow. The other option is to pull all this apart. Let them get a little bit bigger, and then you can transplant them into Coco Peat again and to get them all out of this moss. So if you keep doing that, you can beat it, but the best bet is to fertilize just enough to feed your babies, but not so much to make it moss. And even for me, an expert, that is tricky. The other thing I'll talk about is Nepenthes lowi seeds, any of those really ultra highland, slow growing, we all want them, Nepenthes. Those can be very, very slow from seed. So if you want to try Nepenthes seeds, try like a Ventricosa or a hybrid. Hybrid seeds grow really fast. These are Ventricosa by Mike Guy, and I'm really excited about these too. I don't think that cross has ever been done before. And I sowed these in May, and they're already really big. Like we'll be able to sell these really soon. So, but it doesn't always go that way, and you just never know. You can see this little patch here is much smaller, probably they got a little less food. So this is where the finesse comes in, and this is where the tricky part comes in, of feeding them and not feeding your moss. Also, as soon as they get a pitcher big enough, get a little Osmocote pellet in there. That makes such a huge, big difference, and it's contained to the plant itself, so it won't be feeding the moss. And you can even use an Osmocote pellet and just put it next to some of these little seedlings, and that will continuously feed them every time you water. I think I've tackled all the how-tos and most of the big pitfalls. If I missed any, throw those questions in the comments below. And we're gonna keep doing this. So follow for more great videos on how to grow carnivorous plants, especially from seeds.